Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer in that order. Welcome everyone. Today I wanted to do another video sort of inspired by regular rollers, and it's really partially aimed at sort of collectors, and especially collectors who are looking to get into vintage but maybe feel like it's a little too expensive, and that is looking at league leader cards. And league leader cards are a fantastic way to get a lot of bang for your buck, a lot of star power on one card, and collect a lot of like great all-time Hall of Fame greats for not a whole lot of money comparative to sort of their other cards in the set. I was originally going to make like a top 10 countdown type of video, but that sort of got tricky. So I ultimately just came up with 8 good examples of star power league leader cards across the 4 sports. And they're not scientifically ranked here, but they're more or less in increasingly impressiveness order throughout the video. Came up with a couple rules just to decide, which cards to showcase here. Minimum of 3 players per card. That unfortunately eliminated basically all football, as football is almost always 2 players per card, but only looking at cards with all Hall of Famers. I did make one exception to that second rule there for this list, and then active player cards only, like for example in 1973, there's a Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth card, which that's about as good as you can get, but Babe Ruth was 40 years retired at that point, so not counting cards like that. All right, we'll start with the one that's just way under the radar. 1970 Topps National League pitching leaders. You have 4 guys on there, and all 4 of them are in the Hall of Fame. Tom Seaver is really the only sort of all-time great name I would say here, as he's a top 10 starting pitcher of all time probably. The other 3 wouldn't be that high, but Phil Niekro, Fergie Jenkins, and Juan Marichal were all major stars during their era. Again, all 4 of them are Hall of Famers. Tom Seaver and Phil Niekro are both 300-game winners. There's over 1,000 wins represented on this card. I could not find another league leader card that had over 1,000 pitching wins represented on a single card. And this card, you can pick this card up raw in, let's say, X Mint for just a couple dollars. I mean, 53-year-old card here with 4 Hall of Famers, you can get it raw for just a few dollars. Let's say you wanted like a really nice graded, high-grade copy of one of these players. If you bought them individually, you need to pay around $175 for a PSA 8 copy of the Seaver. The other 3 in a PSA 8 would range from about $60 to $75 each. But you can get the League Leaders card here in a PSA 8 for $45. All 4 of the players on one card for just $45. All right, next up is a hockey example, and I find this card interesting for a couple of reasons. 1971 Topps NHL scoring leaders. You got 3 Hall of Famers on there in Phil Esposito, Bobby Orr, and Johnny Busick. Bobby Orr is really the big star power here, but again, all 3 are Hall of Famers. A couple interesting things about this one. One, Bobby Orr is a defenseman. A defenseman being near the top of the scoring leaders chart in the NHL is pretty rare. Most of the times that occurred in NHL history, it was Bobby Orr. The other interesting thing about this is all 3 of them there you can see are Boston Bruins. How stacked must that Boston Bruins team have been? Another card where if you want a nice raw copy, it's just not going to cost you a whole lot. You can get a nice copy for probably under $10. Ungraded. But let's say you really wanted a sort of a higher grade Bobby Orr card from this era, let's say a PSA 7. It would cost you about $200 for 71 Topps Bobby Orr in a PSA 7, but you get the league leaders in a PSA 7 here for about 25% of that, and then you also get the 2 other Hall of Famers on there as well. All right, next up a basketball example. 1970 Topps scoring leaders. You got Jerry West, Lou Alcindor, and Elvin Hayes. Lou Alcindor changed his name later to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and 3 Hall of Famers here. Big names. Going by the ESPN Top 75 All-Time Players list, which came out about a year ago. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar ranks as the 3rd greatest player of all time. Jerry West ranks as the 19th greatest player of all time. And Elvin Hayes is your weakest link, ranking as the 58th greatest player of all time. So pretty impressive star power on that card here. Let's say you wanted a nice, solid, sort of mid-grade copy of an early year Kareem Abdul-Jabbar card. If you wanted an SGC 5 copy of the 1970 Topps, you're going to have to pay around $200, similar price point to the Bobby Orr. Or you can buy the League Leaders card, SGC 5, solid mid-grade card of actually 2nd year of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And oh, by the way, you also get Jerry West and Elvin Hayes on the card as well for just $25. All right, next up another hockey example, this one featuring the great one. 1980 OPC NHL scoring leaders, Marcel Dion, Wayne Gretzky, and Guy Lafleur. Of course, Wayne Gretzky is the big name here, although again all 3 of these are indeed Hall of Famers. This is a 2nd year card of Wayne Gretzky, and as you might imagine, his 2nd year OPC standard card can get pretty pricey, especially if you get into high grade. If you wanted like a really nice high grade copy of a 2nd year Gretzky OPC PSA 9, costs you over $2,000, $2,300. But if you wanted to get the league leaders as an alternative You can get it for just a fraction of the price, $275. And of course, you get the 2 extra Hall of Famers on there as a bonus. Next up is a baseball example. This is the one exception I made to the Hall of Famers only rule at the beginning. It's 1962 Topps American League home run leaders. Features 4 players: Roger Maris, Mickey Mantle, Harmon Killebrew, and Jim Gentile. And actually, only 2 of these are Hall of Famers. Roger Maris is not a Hall of Famer, nor is Jim Gentile. But the reason I made the exception for this one is it's a very historically significant card in that it highlights the Roger Maris 61 home run season in 1961. That's the year he set the single season home run record, and that record lasted close to 40 years. For that reason, you could say Roger Maris is really the star of this card, making Mickey Mantle your number 2. Not often where you're going to find Mickey Mantle as the number 2 player on a card from the 1960s. Harmon Killebrew also in the Hall of Fame, also over 500 home runs, all-time great. And Jim Gentile really is sort of a weakest link here, but we're going to overlook that for the sake of the historical perspective. Let's say we wanted a Mickey Mantle card from the 60s in respectable, lower mid-grade. We'll say a PSA 4. Well, 62 Mantle and a PSA 4 is $375 or so. And the Roger Maris is also about $85, as it's the first card to show in the stats, his 61 home run season. We can get the league leaders card here for just $55 in a PSA 4. That's less than the cost of the Maris, just a fraction of the cost of the Mantle. You also got Harmon Killebrew on there, and a very nice historically relevant card here for $55. Next up is another basketball example, 1972 Topps NBA rebounds leaders, featuring Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wes Unseld. And if you thought the ESPN rankings was impressive on that last basketball card, listen to the NBA rankings by ESPN for these 3 players. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the number 3 player of all time. Wilt Chamberlain, the number 5 player of all time. So you have 2 of the top 5 players of all time on this one card. And then Wes Unseld also cracks the top 50, coming in at number 48. That's a lot of star power here on one card. I just thought the image was sort of funny on this card. Doesn't it seem like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is checking out Wes Unseld's haircut there? But anyway, this is one of the more extreme examples, at least in high grade, of a way to save money. In PSA 9s, a Wilt Chamberlain from 1972 Topps would cost over $2,000, as would the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wes Unseld around $350. But the league leader card comes in for just $230 in a PSA 9, less than the cost of the Unseld and about 10% of either the Chamberlain or the Jabbar. Just a great way to pick up, these players in ultra high grade for a more affordable price. All right, we're down to our final 2 examples, and both of them are baseball. First is 1966 Topps NL batting leaders, and it features Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, and Willie Mays. This would be my no-brainer pick for the best 3-player card star power in sports card history. Over 10,000 hits and over 1,500 home runs represented on this card. Willie Mays and Hank Aaron would both be in basically any expert's top 10 list, most of their top 5. Some might even have them as both in the top 3. And Roberto Clemente, not that far down, maybe 15 to 20 or so, something like that. It would be tough to come up with a 3-player combo better than this one. This card's actually one of the worst examples of being able to save you money by buying the leaders card instead of the base card of the players, simply because it's actually a card that's gone way up in value in the last couple of years as people realize how cool it is, featuring 3 such all-time greats on it. But if you wanted to pick up the Clemente, the Aaron, or the Willie Mays in, let's say, an SGC 5, solid mid-grade, it's going to range from you can see 110 for the Clemente up to 190 for the Mays, and the league leaders card in an SGC 5 goes for about 145. So not big savings here, but still a very cool card, obviously. And that brings us to what, in my opinion, is the greatest star power league leaders card of all time. 1963 NL home run leaders, featuring Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, and Orlando Cepeda. 5 for 5 on Hall of Famers, and I believe that it is the only vintage card ever to feature 5 Hall of Famers on it. And these aren't just everyday Hall of Famers. As I mentioned earlier, Aaron and Mays are both top probably 5 players of all time. Frank Robinson and Ernie Banks, he's probably in the top 20. And Orlando Cepeda is a Hall of Famer as well. You've got 4 players on here with over 500 home runs. There's nearly 3,000 home runs represented on this single card, which is pretty incredible. You've got the best player in Braves history, the best player in Cubs history, probably the best player in Giants history, all here on one card. Could go on and on and on. The potential savings on this card is not nearly as extreme as some of the earlier examples, but it's still there. If you wanted to pick up 63 tops cards of any of these Hall of Famers in mid-grade, Aaron's about $200, the Mays about $260, Ernie Banks about $75, Robinson $50, and Orlando Cepeda $40. Those are all in PSA 5 grade. The League Leaders card on its own in a PSA 5 about $90. So you can get all 5 of these players on one card for about a third the price of the Mays. And I want to finish on this sort of funny tidbit. And I forget who it was who somebody left me in the comments, or it was in an email. I couldn't remember, and I couldn't find it. So if it was you, please put in the comments that it was you, and I'll thank you that way. But somebody asked, what's a League Leaders card with the worst combination of players on it of all time? And they offered this as a suggestion: 1961 Topps, American League, wins leaders. And yeah, I could not find a better answer to the question than this card here. You've got 6 players on here, and I've been dealing vintage cards for decades, and I only recognize 2 of the 6 names here, and Jim Perry in the upper right and Milt Pappas in the lower right, and neither of those guys ever came close to anything like a Hall of Fame career. I looked up the other 4, and 3 of the other 4 never even reached 10 career WAR. So basically, completely irrelevant careers. Funny that a League Leaders card with 6 players on it produced no Hall of Famers, no borderline Hall of Famers, and 3 completely throwaway players. But that's it. These are just 8 that I picked, but there are many other great ones. So if there's one that I missed, or a really good League Leaders card that you know of that I didn't mention here, please leave it in the comments, and happy to take a look. And hope you enjoyed, and see you all again real soon. Thanks, everyone.